Hey, 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 hey. How is everybody doing tonight? Listen, it is so good to be back. Oh, it is so good to be back. I can't even explain to you, my nerves are going, everything is firing off. But I am so excited to be back in front of you guys doing Warrior Wisdom Wednesday. Yes, I'm so excited. Listen, I want to give you guys a minute. Come on in. Make sure you share this with your friends. Bring it and call a sister friend into the room. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Because it is going to be good tonight. It is going to be so good tonight. Listen, I'm ready to go ahead and get this thing popping. Hopefully, you guys can see me okay and everything is firing off. You know, tech can be tech. And so I just want to make sure that you guys can see me okay. We'll get a sound check in a minute that you guys can hear me and everything is good. So let me know where you guys are tuning in from. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know, what's been happening because it's been a minute. You hear me? A minute. So, yeah, like I said, I'm so excited to be here tonight. My name is Ayana Henderson. I am the generational change agent. And if you are familiar, you know about Warrior Wisdom Wednesday and my platform, Warrior Womanhood. But if you're new to me, I just like to say welcome to Warrior Wisdom Wednesday and tell you a little bit about what Warrior Wisdom Wednesday is, why I do it, and who I do it for. And so, what that looks like is, Warrior Wisdom Wednesday is your midweek recharge and soul care sanctuary. It's an online teaching series that takes a deep dive into topics of soul care, emotional wellness, and generational health. Each session is filled with powerful teachings and practical tools and uplifting insights that will help you heal, grow, and transform from the inside out. So, listen, I hope y'all are ready and y'all are ready. Okay. And if you are, you can go ahead and put, girl, I'm ready. I am here. You can go ahead and put that in the chat. And we are going to go ahead and get started because this is going to be jam packed. I've shared a little bit about what my storm season has been like. And so tonight we're going to go into a little bit more detail about what that looks like and how God really helped me through that season, because it is my belief that we don't have to go through these seasons alone, that we totally can learn from one another and glean from how each other has handled these seasons. So if you just see me moving around on the screen, it's just because I want to make sure that the tech is teching, because I promise you, as soon as we think something is working, all of a sudden it's not, right? And so no matter how much you prep, the tech is going to be tech and the Wi-Fi going to be Wi-Fi. Okay, that for sure. All right, so I want to go ahead and get started on tonight's session. And tonight I've labeled this the hurricane season. And so the reason why I call it the hurricane season is because as I was coming out of my storm season, God had given me the analogy of a hurricane. And so he started to correlate the different things. And what's so dope about even when I'm going through a season, God gives it to me in a way in which it's teachable. So that way I can come back and help another sister, right? And pull her up out of her storm and help her out, right? So go ahead and make sure you tag, you like, you share. Tag a sister friend, somebody you may who know is going through a storm or just coming out, and just trying to figure out, what do I do next? What does that look like? Or they just feel like something is brewing in their spirit. So go ahead and tag her, let her know we are live. And so as we get into hurricane seasons, one of the things that happens in the South that doesn't really happen in the North as much is you experience more hurricanes in the South than you do in the North. So in the North, by the time they make it to us, it's like a tropical storm or a thunderstorm. But down here, there is a full season in which, the impact can be great. We just actually came out of a hurricane that really impacted Texas. And so what he did was he said, Ayana, there are 3 ways that the hurricane season shows up, right? And what that looks like. So he said that's going to look like thunderstorms, tropical storms, and hurricanes. So I said, well, God, what does that have to do with healing? What does that have to do with, emotional healing? And he said, well, it correlates this way. When you're in a thunderstorm, right, it feels like an exchange. Something petty happened, somebody said something, somebody popped off, and it's something that just kind of offended you. And so when you think about thunderstorms, they're not that big, they're not that grand. Like, they can be a little scary, but they're not um, as scary as like tropical storms or hurricanes. So he said tropical storms equate to like having misplaced expectations. So you expected something from someone or some place or something. You expected something to happen, but instead it just didn't. And that could be because it was miscommunicated, never communicated, or the person just fell short, right? And then he said, well, the hurricanes then are like exploitations where you've been completely violated. Like, there's damage, like you already know there's going to be significant damage. And so what he said was, when you're in a tropical storm, you might go to the grocery store and gather some supplies just in case. But when they tell you that a hurricane is coming, they tell you to hunker down. They may even tell you to move out of your home based on the severity. You're getting generators, you're getting sandbags, you're boarding up homes. You treat a hurricane different. And so a hurricane, it's almost like it encompasses the thunderstorm and the tropical storm, along with the winds and all the things, right? And so what I came out of was a hurricane season. And the reason why I say it's a hurricane season is because there were multiple things that were happening at one time. And so that one time was over a year and a half. Y'all, can y'all believe it's been a year and a half since I've gone live, since I've done a Warrior Wisdom Wednesday? Like, that, it blows my mind. That's bananas to me. Bananas. A year and a half of hiatus doing the Warrior Wisdom Wednesday. And so what that looked like for me in my world, it looked just like this. It was, I experienced the second divorce. So I was married before and was divorced. I remarried, and then that marriage ended. I had some challenging situations with my children at the beginning of last school year. There was some family drama that we were all trying to work out. I experienced being laid off suddenly. And this is like all happening sort of concurrently. And so I had a second job that I was working that ended within 2 days of the job ending. So I'm without work, I'm without income, I'm dealing with some challenging situations with my kids. I am experiencing a second divorce. And now I have to figure out how I'm going to move myself and my children into a new home. Once I do that, I experienced 3 flat tires in 2 weeks. And then I ended up picking up another contract position, which I had to terminate the contract for various reasons. And so I'm looking at all of these things that are happening, right? That is a lot for one person to go through in a single year period. And I know that there are more things that other people are dealing with. But what I was going through was really like, oh my God, this is a lot. So you're talking about ending a marriage. So you're feeling the ripping apart of your souls and all that comes with it. And we lived together for 5 months after the divorce was final, like until we rented a home when we moved down here. And we didn't leave until our lease was up. And I'm thinking, God, how am I going to make this work? I am like fully separated from this man. And, all of our assets and things like that are now divided. And I have to try to move children into a new place and figure out how we're going to make that work. And so we didn't renew the lease or anything like that because it was going up so high. And so decided like, no, the best thing to do is to just, find our separate places and go our separate ways. And so that was what my hurricane season consisted of. So you see that it was multiple things. It was the thunderstorms, the tropical storms, and the hurricanes all mixed in one, right? All mixed in one. So I want to break down to you the 8 ways that God literally walked me through this season and how I came out better than what I was when I sort of entered that season. And so this is why I wrote that post about becoming the warrior woman, because sometimes you think you're at a place and then God brings you through a series of trials and tribulations, and then you come out. That's why I love that scripture where it's like, just consider it all joy, the trials and tribulations that you experience, because it's going to produce character, it's going to produce endurance, it's going to produce stamina. And that's exactly what it did to me. And I want to show you that in real time and have a real conversation about what that actually looks like and what it could mean for you if you're experiencing a storm. It may not be all of this that's on the screen, it may not be all of that, but it certainly may be other things that you're dealing with that just feel like it's one thing after another, after another, after another, after another. And you don't have to feel like the storm is going to consume you, that it's going to kill you, that it's going to take you out, that it's going to just shift you in a way that you feel like you may not be able to recover from, right? So let's get into these 8 steps, because I really want you to have them. And I also don't want to hold you up. I want to be mindful of your time, right? So here we go with the first one, right? So step one is the radar, right? So when you are entering a hurricane season, one of the things that you'll check for is the news, right? You'll want to see the weather forecast. You'll want to see what's happening. You want to see how the storm is brewing. So the meteorologists, what they're going to do is they're going to track everything as far out as they can to tell you when to expect it to hit, how the severity, the impact, the potential damage it could cause, and what to expect. So what does that look like for us? We are looking on our emotional radar, right? We're looking at our life and we're seeing, what do we feel like is about to hit? Now, this could be an intuition. It could be a gut feeling. It could be a vibe that you're getting, like things just feel off. You sometimes know that an argument is about to brew, or you just feel like, something's not right with my kids. I'm trying to figure it out. They seem a little, down, sad, what have you. And so you're trying to see what's on the radar so you know what to prepare for. Am I preparing for a thunderstorm, which is, like an exchange or offense? Am I preparing for misplaced expectations? Or am I looking at something more severe? Right. And so my radar, right, my emotional radar, when I was entering this season it started maybe it was like a 3-year, my decision to end my marriage was a 3-year decision. It was a 3-year decision-making process. So my radar was 3 years out, where I was already considering, I was wondering, I was, praying and fasting and doing all the things, right? So everything that was tracking up to the day that I finally made that decision was telling me to look at my exchanges, look at my expectations, and look at anything that may feel like a violation. And so every time I did that, I was able to watch my radar change. I was able to watch it shift. I was able to see me grow. I was able to figure out what tools I needed to implement in that particular part of the season. I knew something was going to happen. A decision was going to be made. Either I was going to stay or I was going to leave. It was going to be that simple. And so as I was going through the process, that radar screen was definitely up. So I'm asking you, when you feel like a storm is brewing, when you feel like something is about to pop off, you really want to pay attention to what your body is telling you, what your spirit is telling you, and then take that to God and see if he can provide you clarity on what exactly it is that you are dealing with, right? So let me go to the next step, right? So after we are now on our radar, we're tracking that something is off, something is shifting within us, something needs to change, something different needs to happen. And we're trying to figure out what that is, right? The next step is going to be preparation, right? And so when we're learning that there is a storm brewing, a hurricane is coming, a tropical storm is coming, something is happening, right? We're looking at how are we going to prepare for this? If it's a thunderstorm, maybe we're going to get to the store a couple of hours early, get what we need so we can be at home before the thunderstorm hits. A tropical storm, we might want to get more supplies, like something that may last us a couple of days at a time. Before a hurricane, we're looking at getting, maybe a couple of days worth of supplies because we're not sure what's going to happen. Like we just had a storm hit in Savannah and there is a lot of flooding there. Schools are closed. They may be open back up now, but schools are closed and people are trying to get the supplies that they need. Things are closed. Nobody can access them. So it's going to be an opportunity for you to gather the people, identify the places, and purchase the things you need to fortify and support your foundation once this storm hits. Because at this point, it's coming. You're just not quite sure the severity of how it's going to impact you. And so that's why it's important to identify those people. So for me, entering this season, it looked like making sure my therapist was in place. I think I had a mentor at that point. I was connected to a local church. Um, I had created a space within my home so that I would feel emotionally safe. And there were other things like around the job front, around budgeting, right? Just putting tools and practical things in place. I looked at how I shopped. I looked at my expenses. I looked at what I needed to save. I looked at how not now having income coming in that was going to affect any future planning that needed to happen. And so you have an opportunity to get ahead of the storm by doing those things in your preparation phase. That is, again, gathering people, identifying the places, and purchase the things that you need to fortify your support and your foundation when the storm hits. The next step was, this was probably the hardest part, right? It was wait it out. So step 3 in terms of getting through the storm was wait it out. And what that meant was, once the storm hits, you must exercise a level of self-control, discipline, and grace. And this part requires patience and trust, because you don't know how long it's going to last. Sometimes a storm can be like in Georgia, we're good for having a 10-minute thunderstorm. Like it's sunny and it's rainbows, and then all of a sudden there's a downpour of rain, and then it clears up maybe within 10 or 15 minutes. But in a hurricane season, you're not sure how long. It could be hours, it could be days. The aftermath could last even longer. And so you have to figure out, what am I going to do if the power goes out? What am I going to do if I don't have the things that I need to sustain my emotional and mental health? What do I need to put in place? This is why that preparation phase is so important. It's so important. And when I lost my job, one of the next things that showed up in my life, or to be able to do, was fast. One of my close friends was having a 21-day surrender your ear fast. And it literally came 2 weeks after I lost both incomes. And I was thinking, like, what in the world am I going to do? How am I going to make this work? How am I going to manage? Like, literally within 48 hours, all income streams that I had were gone. No, like, government assistance, no support, none of those things, right? And I'm thinking, how am I going to make this work? And at this time, everything is final. The divorce is final. We're just living together in the same space. And I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to be able to make this work? I have no income. I have 4 kids that I need to take care of. I just lost my job. My marriage is over. And I'm living in a situation that is not desirable for either of us, because the marriage is over. So you can't really move forward. You can't really start the healing process, because you're cohabitating and you're trying not to offend each other. You're trying not to, create arguments and do all these things. You just want to kind of bow out gracefully, because at this point it's over. And so I'm thinking, like, God, how am I going to do this? There were times where I wanted to say something and I couldn't. There were times where I wanted to address situations, and it was like, well, but it's not going to change. It's not going to change anything. So what am I addressing and why? And I would have to sit with that, and I would have to eat it. There were things that that were revealed to me about my character during that time that would have made me a better wife, that I'm like, I can't do anything about that now. And so it wasn't like I'm having regrets or I'm feeling bad because oh, what is this? I know the exact process that God had walked me through. I know why I came to the decision that I came to, and I wasn't able to move forward until I knew I could fully stand on that decision, personally and biblically. I want to be clear about that, personally and biblically. I wasn't out here just in my feelings and in my emotions like, man, screw this, I'm done. That's really not what it is. And so in that season, that requires a level of patience. It requires a level of trust in God. Did I hear God correctly? Did he say the things that I think that he said? Was I really in my emotions? Is this the truth? Or is it my truth? Is it my emotions? Like, these were all the things that I'm asking myself. So think about, the hurricane has now hit, and all you can do is be in your house with yourself. That's all you can do. All you can do is be in you. All you have is your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your opinion, all the things. And that's what you have to sit with. And that's why that waited out season is going to be the longest part of your hurricane or your storm season. When you're going through something, it's not going to be the radar. The radar just gives you a head up that something is coming. It's not going to be the preparation that's going to help you get through the wait season. So that's why you need to recognize those two things. God, is a storm brewing? It's okay to ask. Is a storm coming my way? Is there something that I should be preparing for? And listening and waiting for the response. This is why that fast was so important and so timely, because all I had was time and opportunity, was space and grace to hear from God. There were no distractions. My kids were in school. I wasn't at work. I wasn't trying to compete with a job. I wasn't trying to mend and fix and heal a marriage. It was literally just me and God. And it was so interesting because I had created this shirt, and the shirt literally says just me and God. And so many people were like, how can, like, are you sure about that? When I tell you, honey, the season I was in, oh, it was me and God. Like, it was me and him. We spent a lot of quiet time together, a lot of tears, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of clarity, a lot of conviction happened in that season. A lot. And that's why that waited out season, part of the storm season, is so crucial. Hey, Dr. Emma. And so this is why you have to look at the different phases of the storm. It's not just going through the storm. A lot of times we want to say all the cliche things. Girl, I was in a storm. Girl, it was just the season. But what did you learn from it? What did you glean from it? I prayed to God. I said, God, we have to leave this marriage more healed and more whole than broken and bruised. Like, we both need to leave that way. Not bitter, not angry, not resentful, not this need to prove to one another, how good we are or what my next season is going to look like. I mean, y'all, I've seen the posts. I've seen them. I've read them. People have brought them to me to show me what's happening on the other side. And my prayer was, God, let's just leave this way more healthy as much as possible than broken and bruised. I don't want him to feel like he has to pick up pieces from me. And I don't want to feel like I have to pick up the pieces from him. I don't want it. And that required that level of patience, that required that level of surrender, that required me to really listen and tap into what that clarity was for what God wanted to bring me through. And that was the other piece, is I had to recognize that I couldn't just move on. I had to move through it. And I had a lot of friends in my ear, and we're going to talk about this in the next couple of steps. I had a lot of friends in my ear like, girl, you just need to move on. And do what? And do what? And I had to call it out. Like, why do you keep telling me to move on? Why do you keep thinking that it's just something that I could do once? I could just take a step and it's done. Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to actually move through it. Because if I'm able to meet a man and get married again, I promise you, I don't want to bring any of it from my first marriage or my second marriage into anything new. I'm a whole new woman. I'm a different version of who I was in that season. And I saw all this talk and this chatter about LaToya Luckett getting married a third time and how many years she's been married and a certain number of years. And I just thought to myself, but if she's doing the work, who she was when she first got married is not who she is now. And that's where God's grace comes in. I don't need anybody else's grace. I don't need anybody else's permission. I don't need anybody else's opinion about how I move next, and neither does he. All we have is God's grace, and so do you. And guess what the book says? His grace is sufficient. Amen, somebody? Like, period, point blank, let's dead that conversation right then and there. Who she is now is not who she was back then. What she desires now is coming from a healed place, is coming from a healthier place, is coming from a better way of how she sees herself, of what she feels like she can bring to the table, of what she feels like she deserves, about sitting down and looking at things like core values and all the different things. That wasn't present then. If it was, it's different now, is all I'm saying. And you don't get that level of clarity of who you are until you actually move through your season, not just move on from it. You have to feel the feels and acknowledge all the things, right? So let's go to the next step, right? So the next step is assess the damage. So after a hurricane season, the first thing you want to do is come out and you look at what's been damaged. What areas has my storm damaged me? Whether it's the people, whether it's the places, whether it's the things. Now, I'm talking about my marriage. I'm talking about my job loss. I'm talking about things that I was dealing with my children. And they weren't like behavioral things. These were like severe things that were impacting my children. And not as a result of the marriage. Let me be clear about that. There were some choices that they made that put them in challenging situations. And as a parent, you try to support yourself while seeing your child hurt, while seeing your child going through challenging situations. And you know that they are learning lessons, but how do you love them through their own storm season while you're in a storm season? That's a whole nother life. Golly. And so step 4 is assess the damage. The storm has now passed, and you now need to assess the emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual damage the life storm has caused. Notice I said that the storm has caused, not that person. I'm not saying the person. Yeah, there were people involved. There were things said. But ultimately, it's your responsibility to assess that damage and heal it. It's just like the poster says. One day she decided to heal and her legacy changed forever. I just had to make a decision of like, okay, I recognize the damage and now I got to figure out what I need to do next. How do I clean this up? How do I make it so that the quality of life for not only myself, but my children is better? How do I do that? What do I need to do? What do I need to figure out? What do I need to remove? What do I need to clean up? What do I need to do next? What is my next one step? And so I told you I lost my job, right? So in January, the divorce was final. I lost my job in March. I lost my consulting contract also in March. I did the 21-day fast in April. My lease was up in June. So in between, I needed to find a way to make my budget work so that I could move the children into our new place. And I needed to do this amicably, right? We didn't need to argue and shout and do any of the things. So God, what does that look like? So we sat down, we redid my budget, and I let God do it. Like, show me where I need to move money. Show me how I need to implement this. Where can I save? And every week we would shift things around. Every week we would shift things around. And then as I was going through the fast, one of the things that was so dope about the fast that I wanted to learn more about, but I also didn't want to expose or open up any portals or spiritual realms. I wanted to learn about how the enemy attacks. I wanted to learn about what are some covenants that I needed to break? What are some things that I needed to renounce? What are some contracts that I made? Because I didn't want to go into my next season having all of this coming with me. And so as we were in that fast, this came up. because it was something that I prayed for. Like, that's how intentional God is. When you're in your preparation season and you're thinking about the things that you want to do, bring those to God, because I promise you, when you get into your storm, he's going to bring it back to your remembrance, and then he'll make the provision for that to actually happen in your storm. I was at the very beginning of my storm. I was only 3 months in. Marriage had only been over for like 2 months, still living together. Still trying to make it, make it doable in the house. You have 2 single people living together who were once married, whose relationship has taken a turn to the point where communication is challenging. I want to paint that picture where it's reduced to, hello, how was your day? It was good. That's good. Nothing mean, nothing harsh, but just minimal communication. And so you're trying to now, God, how do I recover from this? So we go through the budget, we rearrange things. God works it out so that the place that we're moving into is way under my budget. So it makes it really affordable now to move in. It has enough space. Like, I'm watching God work. Then we get into the place and I get 3 flat tires in 2 weeks. 3 flat tires in 2 weeks, stranded on the side of the road, having to call AAA, realizing I now no longer have the covering of a husband to come help me. All these different shifts that I have to make as a result of this hurricane season. These are all the different types of damages that you have to assess. That's why you can't just move on. I'm moving on from not having a covering. I'm moving on from my children not having a father figure in the home. I'm moving on from a 2-income household. I'm moving on from, and the expectation is that I'm just going to move on and everything is going to be good because I'm no longer dealing with a particular type of marriage. That math doesn't make sense. That's why you got to move through it. Because in moving through it, there were certain tools, there were lessons. There was things that I needed to have exposed to me about my character that needed to be fixed in order for it to work, in order for the damage not to take root. Something that I could fix and turn around, which brings me to step 5. Cleanup. So you assess the damage. You're seeing the things that, as a result of now no longer being in the situation, you're now removed. You're no longer around the people. You're no longer in the same space. You've moved on. You're no longer in that job. You're no longer dealing with whatever this storm is, right? It's come to an end. And you're figuring out how. What's next? I see everything that's happening. I'm watching my children come down off of the home environment that they lived in. I'm watching them come out of their rooms and be in the house because they spent so much time trying to avoid arguments. I'm watching them get used to me as a single person. I'm watching them trying to figure out what's mom's personality now. What's discipline now? What is going to change now? Okay. Now I'm trying to figure out, how do I get the morale back up? How do I get the stability back up? Again, still no work. Interviewing, but still don't have a job. I've managed to pay the deposit in the first month. 30 days is coming up real quick. How am I going to pay the rent? I still got other bills that I have to pay from the old place. My 3 flat tires are happening back to back to back. Oh yeah. And my brakes went. So no job, 4 kids that I have to take care of. They're still ending their school year in a previous school district. So I'm having to commute. I'm planning a whole house move. I'm having to pack up and unpack. and then 3 flat tires and my brakes go. And I still got rent to make on the first. How are we looking, coach? How are we looking? Oh, the struggle was real. But when we got there and we assessed what we needed to do, and you rely and you still trust God to get you through it all, this step is similar to the preparation step. God, what do I need? It required me to remove some people. It required me to shift some things around financially. And I had to adjust my lifestyle. I mean, I wasn't ripping and running the streets, but I realized that my presence in the home for the first 6 months we're here is going to be crucial. How I show up now matters. This is a decision on whether or not my children are going to respect me going forward. Let me put that plain and simple. I now have to rebuild the structure of my home while, check this, not taking the position of CEO. Who, God? My next live is going to be called How I Became a Better Wife as a Result of Being Divorced Twice. That's literally the title. Because I still have to learn how to submit to a head should God put that in my life again. And if I become that head in the masculine sense, then I make no space for a covering. So I still have to yield to God as the head of my home, as the man of my home. And everything under that then shifts. How do we work on the parenting? How do we tighten the structure? What are the expectations? What are the things that I need to put in place from day one so that they don't overtake me? Because we're talking about 4 children, 1 parent, and 2 of them are young adults. The other 2 are teenagers. And chat, if you have a teenager, okay, I'm just praying for you in the name of Jesus. And young adults are no different. Young adults are no different. So let's go to step 6. Step 6 are the materials and supplies. So you've likely experienced some damage. You're now realizing it because you've assessed it. And now you're starting this cleanup where you're trying to figure out, who do I need in my life? What can stay? What can't? What has to change? What has to shift? What position do I play? What expectations? What core values do I need to reestablish? What boundaries do I need to reestablish? And what do I need to actually do that to move through it? What does that actually look like? So the materials and the supplies, just like in a hurricane, you go out, you see there's yard damage, you see there's tree limbs down, you see there's things everywhere. There's maybe some flooding. So what do you actually need? Do you need a wet vac? Do you need, some yard tools? Do you need help? I stayed with my mentor. I stayed with her for 1 year. For 1 year, because I knew even after everything was final, I was still going to need to be fortified. I needed to be encouraged. I needed to be convicted. I needed to be held up some days. I needed to be reminded of who I was in Christ as a woman of God. I needed to be reminded of how far I've come. I needed to be reminded of all the work that I've done. I needed to be encouraged and supported. I needed to be prayed for. I needed to be prayed over. I needed to vent. I needed to find safe people in safe places that weren't just going to tell me to move on. I've got my materials and my supplies. I just signed up for the second fast. Same 21-day surrender your ear fast. And I'm just believing that God is going to give me direction and clarity. When we were doing that fast the first time, he gave me all of this. He gave me the rebrand. He gave me the point of the colors of why I do what I do, the brand colors. because each of them represents some sort of awareness, whether it's suicide awareness, PTSD awareness, domestic violence, or sexual assault. All those colors are represented in my brand colors. He streamlined everything. He made it so clear that I believed it. So what materials, what people, what places, how do you need to set up your space so that you can continue to be fortified and supported through your storms, so that you can move forward? Step 7, rebuild and repair. This is where you get to decide what your next season is going to look, feel, and be like. What do you need? We're not talking about what your children need or what other people that you're connected to need. We're talking about what you need. And this was probably one of the hardest parts, because I was so focused on the children. I was so focused on the home life that God was like, no, I need you to get back with me. I need you to get back with me. Because if you don't have me, then everything else is a waste. What does the book say? Next to knowing Christ, everything is rubbish. I'm just saying. I had to figure out what exactly it was that I needed, and I went after it unapologetically. I didn't apologize for friendships that aren't the same. I didn't apologize for any shifts that I had to make. I didn't apologize for the transition. I didn't apologize for keeping my mouth shut when I did want to respond to some of the things that I was seeing on social media. I did what God told me. I shut up and I listened. And in that being quiet and letting God speak, I was able to rebuild and repair major parts of my life where I feel confident enough to go back out and say, yes, I'd love to date again. Yes, I'd love to experience love again. Yes, I am a wife. Like my who I am as a woman is better. Not because the marriage ended, because of my heart posture to focus on Christ. We're always talking about I'm going for my next and my future this and my future that. God was like, yeah, focus on me first. Say nothing. Do the bare minimum on social media. Keep your mouth shut until I give you the okay to respond, react, to do anything. And even then, follow my instructions of what I tell you to say. Because my prayer was also, God, please don't let me uncover him. Don't let me get out here and say things out of my flesh. Let it be honorable, but let it be the truth. And so in this step, it required me to even reframe my language around how I was going to talk about having been married twice, still wanting to desire marriage. What does it look like to become a warrior woman? What does it look like to re-engage with the world after being gone for a year and a half? What does all of that look like? How am I going to parent my children after I refocus on God? How am I going to run the household as best I can with God as the lead? What does that truly look like? Because I didn't just go from a married woman to a single person. I went from a married woman to a single mom. And there's a big difference in terms of responsibility. And so this last step here, step 8, is reinforce. Once you've decided what it is that you need, what do you need to support it? And this is different from the materials and the supplies. The materials and the supplies get you to start your process of healing from your storm. Now you need to sustain it. So what are those things that you need to reinforce? Even though, so my mentor is still my mentor. Still have my therapist. In fact, we doubled up on sessions because I was so intent that I'm not going to show up bitter. I'm not going to show up resentful. I'm not going to show up harmful. I'm not going to show up hurtful. I am going to show up as the warrior woman. I am going to show up as a woman who's committed her life to following Christ and his instruction. I'm not going to get it perfect. I'm not going to do it perfectly. But by the grace of God, I know that he will continue to sustain me through this process. So I know that one of my reinforcements was to get back into my word the way that I was consistently doing it, not just dibbling dabbling, to really establish and reestablish my morning routine with God. That was going to be one way I was going to reinforce it, because eventually I'm going to come off of therapy. Can I sustain myself after that's happened? Can I put things in place to prepare me for the next storm? Because even in the Bible, it says offenses will come. It doesn't say they might, like maybe, sort of, like maybe once every 3 years you'll experience these offenses. No, it doesn't say that. It just says they'll come. And we don't know when they're coming. So whatever I'm reinforcing has to help me in my next storm season. It just does. And you wouldn't know any of this information if you just moved on, if you just got over it, if you just threw your hands up and said, it's whatever. And so that's why I want to express the benefits, right? The benefits of a storm season. Because we look at the storm season and we're like, oh, here we go. It's just going to be a lot of things that I have to clean up and all these different things. But let me just give you 4 top benefits of a storm season. The first one is it restructures your heart to focus on what's important. When I lost my job, when I lost the income, I got right with Christ. And I was in a job in a ministry where we talked about Jesus all the time. That was actually one of the ways he prepared me for my storm. He put me in a job with people who work in a ministry, who pray every single day, not for just you professionally, but for you personally. Put me around people that could give me guidance, who had actually experienced some of the things that I was experiencing, who pushed me to show biblically my decision was sound. So contrary to what else is being said out there, the level that I had to go through to not only make sure that what I was doing personally was biblically sound, that was 8 months. 8 months that I spent in that space. 2, the storm actually provides sustenance that you didn't know you needed. When a hurricane happens, or even a tropical storm or a thunderstorm, all that rain uproots things like seeds, and it shifts certain landscapes, and it recreates the way that the world is designed. There are boulders and rocks that need to be moved, and it can't do it without the force of the water. And so the flooding, yes, it's an inconvenience in your home, but for the world, for how God designed it to work, it has to shift. And nobody's going out just moving boulders and binders, all these things. And so these new now seeds from all the trees that are now being shifted around create new life, which then bring in things you just didn't even know you needed. I needed to know that I was strong enough to do what I'm doing now. I needed to know that my fear, it means nothing compared to what God has done. I've shared this before a while ago. My mom and I, we lived together up until her death, there was only maybe a short period of time where we didn't live together. And so I went from living with my mom, even when my children were small, to getting married the first time and living apart for a short while, to coming back home, to us living together again, and then getting married, remarried, and moving out of the home and living, with my husband at the time, and then being separated and living with my mom again until her death, and then moving back with my husband at the time, and then ending that marriage. So this is the first time in my entire life that I've actually been on my own, raising my children without the support of a significant other or parents. Terrified. But I needed to know that I actually could do it. And I didn't know I needed that. The level of confidence that I have within myself is astronomical. It wasn't what it was. I still lived in that fear. I was released from that fear simply by going through my own storm season. 3, it's regenerative. Regenerative. Lord, I cannot say this word. Regenerative. There we go. And reproductive. It brings new life. I'm a new person. I'm a new version. And because I'm this new version, my children experience a different me, which means that how they show up is now different. It impacts my legacy. It impacts how my children engage. It impacts the conversations that we have. Y'all, we're reading books together. Like the kids are reading 7 Habits for Highly Effective Teens. My 2 older boys were about to start the book Integrity. And, then we'll eventually get into Bible studies and things like that. And so it's just like, it's just to see God work, And then finally 4, it's needed and it's necessary. Your storm season is needed and it's necessary because it helps you grow. It helps you strengthen, who you are, what you believe about yourself. It exposes things that need to be healed, that need to be dealt with. All the things. So don't discount your storm season simply because it feels hard, simply because it feels challenging, simply because it's just tiring and it's stressful. Because who you are when you come out of that storm, if you actually go through it and you really stick to that waited out season, is going to be so much more powerful than had you not even gone through the storm season to begin with. So I'm just saying, don't discount your storm season. Y'all, was this good or was this good? I don't know. This helped me. I always say, like, sometimes I think I be talking to y'all, but a lot of times I just be talking to me and I be doing it live because it just reminds me of how good God is. It just reminds me of how good he is. That even in the storms, he works those out for my good. Like I wanted to get lit on this social media. Oh, I had the petty betties. And he was like, no, this is not who I've called you to be. You cannot show up that way. You can't show up that way. How you want to be out here talking about you, the warrior woman? And many times I went to my mentor, I went into my therapist, and I'm like, but I went to God, like, can I just, and every time it was like, nope, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. And so the title that I take most seriously now is Woman of God. Is Woman of God. This is how I choose to show up. And any other way is dishonoring. Any other way. So listen, I try to keep these to an hour. We're hitting the 55-minute mark. I really want to thank you all who tuned in, who shared, who commented. I see you, Mama Emma. I called you Dr. Emma. Listen, that's not your title. I know you got the credentials, but I'm calling you Mama Emma. Tiara, who does the 21-day Surrender Your Ear fast. It is kicking off August 24th to September 14th. You definitely want to check it out. I'll make sure she puts the link in the chat. Sis, if you want to go ahead and put that link in the chat for those who watch the replay so that they can get in on that, because it's going to be powerful. It's early. Okay. You'll have to get up a little early. You're on the East Coast, 6 a.m. But it's probably the best time of your day just to be able to really hear from God. And so I'm just expecting that God is going to show up and show out like he did in my first fast. This is, I believe, her third corporate fast cycle. But, I really do hope this helps somebody navigate their storm season and to be able to show up and testify to how good God is without being petty, without being exposing, without being hurtful or dishonoring, but still standing in the truth of what you went through and what you experienced. There are a lot of people who are doing that tennis match, watching to see what's happening on both sides. This will probably be the only time you'll hear me address it in this way. And that's it. I'll talk about my experience, but that's as far as it's going to go. What it all came down to was when my storm was over and when that last raindrop fell, I decided that I was going to show up as the woman God had called me to be. There was no other option. That I was just going to become her. And there are still some days where it's challenging. But I believe warrior womanhood is going to change lives. My story is different. How I feel about my story is different. The freedom I have to even share my story in its entirety, totality, fully and wholly is different. How I want you guys to experience me is different. It's honest. It's raw. It's real. Inside my coaching community, you get more of this. I don't hold back. This isn't about looking perfect and doing all these things. It's really about seeing a woman of God walk through the challenges of life and holding Christ's hand the whole time. So y'all, I love y'all. The replays will be inside the warrior community. It's a free community. You can search it up on Facebook. Just go type in warrior womanhood, and then click join. And all the replays will be in there. They'll come down off of my public page and the business page, and they'll go right into the community. So ladies, you want to make sure you join that community so that you can get all of the replays there. But until next Wednesday, thank you for hanging with me. I love y'all to life. Peace, love, and warrior strength. I pray y'all have an amazing evening. Take care, guys. Thank you for tuning in.